Welcome to the Woven Energy Podcast on real practical shamanism, where we're here to talk about shamanism from the ground up. And in this Christmas special, we have some very special guests with us. We have Graham from, I'm sure you've heard Graham on the Heretics podcast, brilliant podcast that Graham does with Damon over on the Miasma, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit. And we also have newcomer to the Woven Energy clan, Tammo. So Tammo has recently started a podcast with Damon all about, should we say martial arts or shall we say Aikido? What should we say?
Say energy art. Energy
arts, all on energy arts. So we can perhaps just introduce each other a bit, talk about those podcasts and why you lovely Woven Energy listeners should go and listen to those other podcasts, and we might highlight a few episodes to get started with as well. So I'm going to start, Damon and Graham. You've been doing the Heretics podcast for a long time now, and the Heretics podcast, Damon, do you want to introduce it, or Graham, do you want to introduce what the Heretics podcast is all about? Because I think it is of immense value to those who are avid listeners to the Woven Energy podcast. It's all about a massive part of becoming a shaman. So do you want to introduce that?
Graham? Go on, Damon. You can start.
All right, okay. So on the original Woven Energy podcast, we joked a lot about a thing we were half calling the Miasma podcast. And the idea was to talk about the sort of the negative aspects of shamanism within civilized settled societies, which are legion, absolutely legion. And so Graham was kind enough to agree to host it with me. And he's right. We've done a lot of episodes now. We just keep racking them out. And we've done a lot of subjects as well. I mean, for a long time, it was sort of general interest, wasn't it? We did stuff about martial arts. We did stuff about history. We did stuff about Christianity, quite a lot of stuff about Christianity, the early origins of Christianity.
We still do.
We still do. What else did we do?
We did the history of Jiu-Jitsu and Kempo.
That's
which is a
right.
big series we started. And we started a whole series about different dynasties in China, which we went through a lot of them. We also started a long-running series about Xingyi, which is, we still did some episodes in the last year, which is still episode 13 or 14.
Yeah, we're doing about 14 hours on the history of Xingyi.
We're almost halfway. But we've got up to episode 91 now.
You also did quite a few episodes that could be considered more directly related to shamanism, and perhaps what our listeners at Woven Energy will be interested in. Things like the chemical wedding, right?
Well,
that's one of my requests. If you can finish that, because that's super interesting to me.
We have started teaching people stuff. I mean, we were never intended to teach people anything on heretics. We were just there for sort of general interest, general discussion. But recently, we've launched our alchemical tutorial series. So we're kind of teaching people alchemy in the same way that Woven Energy is encouraging people to actually do shamanism, not just talk about it. So it's been a good thing. Chemical wedding, we got to, was it just day one we got the end
we
of
just
it?
done day one.
I think you did like 3 or 4 episodes on day one. It's just day one and you've already got a few hours in.
In a way, our alchemy tutorials are going to help set the foundation for the remainder of the chemical wedding, which is an alchemical text. So in a way, we're doing it the right way around.
So would I be right in saying listeners of the Woven Energy would benefit from the Heretics podcast by gaining a understanding of what the miasma is through lots and lots of different just examples, just example after example, perhaps more historical based, because it's easier to see the miasma from a historical perspective.
Yeah, exactly.
But ultimately, it's all about the miasma, how to mitigate the miasma in your own life such that it can really enhance and help you in your shamanic journey, so to speak.
Well, it also explains a lot. I think if you're trying to be a shaman in a, modern Western country like the UK, or indeed the USA, you will encounter difficulties with the people around you, just simply because you're trying to do that. And you're not saying listening to the Heretics podcast will mitigate those difficulties, but they will certainly help you understand why you're having them.
Yeah. Okay. So
lead
perhaps
into the next one. One of the things we did famously on Heretics is we give Aikido a right bashing. We have our most infamous episode was the Heretics episode on Aikido.
It gained some traction, did that one, didn't it?
Yes, and one of the wonderful things that came out of that is we gained as one of our tribe an extremely senior Aikido instructor from Austria who has recently launched a podcast with me. So, Tammo, do you want to give us some background on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I encountered the whole woven energy universe through this Aikido episode, through this bashing of Aikido, let's say it like that. And I was quite intrigued, to be honest, because I claim, or I like to think of myself as having quite an open mind. And I don't take it personally if people don't criticize something that I do. And I've been quite uneasy with the whole Aikido setup for, let's say, the last 10 to 15 years. And I've been practicing it because I just like practicing it. But this whole underlying implication of martial arts and self-defense and so, I kind of found it a little bit unbelievable. And from my point of view today. And when I listened to that episode, it kind of struck something with me. And Damon came across as somebody too who was very knowledgeable about this whole issue, this whole cultural issue, and also martial arts issue. So I decided to take contact with him. And since then, I've picked up a little bit of Shingi, but more of Kempo. I've been practicing Kempo quite seriously, and that has influenced my Aikido a great deal. And I mean, Damon and we've been joking about this whole issue of Aikido for quite some while now. And then for a couple of weeks ago, we just decided to go in and let's just start talking about how we would, I wouldn't want to say fix Aikido, but let's say change Aikido.
Yeah, I would say fix it.
Yeah, well, that's another issue, the whole terminology around it. So it's quite fun, I must say. And yeah, we'll see how that goes.
Episode 3 next.
Yes, episode 3 is next. And just in reference to what you were saying about the Heretics podcast and miasma, this whole issue about the miasma and also you guys talking about it has helped me a lot in my shamanic practice. It's also caused some grief, I have to say, but it's something I've come to accept, that it's not easy if you start dealing with these issues, especially if you start addressing your miasma very consciously and how it affects your everyday life. So, but it's been very, very interesting and highly beneficial for my personal, let's say, development in life.
Tammo, can I ask you a question, which I think will relate to a lot of our audience? You know, when you first start doing this more shamanic kind of stuff, you end up scaring people around you, and people around you think, oh no, he's joined a cult and all this kind of stuff. Did you ever experience any of that? Yeah,
sure, but I didn't scare them. I offended them without really wanting to offend them. The most interesting discussion I had was with a longtime friend. I've been practicing for, let's say, the last 15 years with him. And he used to come regularly to my school, and he would teach some lessons. And I think I was about maybe into a year or half a year of practicing or being interested in shamanism. I just, out of the blue, I just asked him to explain from his point of view what the concept of ki and what the difference between ki and kokyu is. Because he always used to use them, how do you say this in English?
Interchangeably.
Interchangeably.
Exactly, interchangeably. Yeah. And he got very angry with me, and in a way which kind of surprised me, because his first reaction was, Tammo, how long have you been studying Aikido now? And you still don't know what ki is. So he answered with a question, not with an answer, and it was very interesting, this kind of reaction. So
very judgmental.
I experience that all the time on discussion forums. I think that might just be me.
Yeah, but you're up for that kind of thing, aren't you? I mean, it's your job.
I tend to stick a annoying question in all the time about, what do you really mean when you say this? And you always get that answer back of, Well, if you have to ask that question after 20 years of practice, you've clearly learned nothing. No.
Yeah.
Like, even last week, someone did that to me, and I just laughed at it, and it was hilarious.
Mm.
Yeah.
So I would say if you are interested in Aikido, energy arts, if you're interested in that kind of aspect, which, when you zoom way, way out, it's all the same stuff, then you can go and check out that podcast. What's it called? What's the podcast actually called?
Fixing Aikido.
Fixing Aikido.
Otherwise known as
not Aikido
AKA
2.0.
Well, it's also known as Aikido 2.0. Both names are awesome. But
So that's
technically, it's called Fixing Aikido, and the product of that podcast and me and Tammo's and interactions, and also my BJJ teacher, Graham, over time will be Aikido 2.0. That will be the output product. Yeah, Graham's accused me of being his Shigi teacher for so many years. I get my own back now.
So if that interests you at all, then go and check out that brand new podcast with Damon. Graham, do you think for the benefit of the Woven Energy listeners, you think you could pick out maybe 2 or 3 episodes from the massive catalogue of past episodes that people could go and listen to perhaps get a really nice introduction to the heretics?
Well,
have you got any in mind?
I was just looking back at the last year.
Or your personal favourite, of course.
Yeah, I mean, I'm much more interested in martial arts myself. So my personal favourite is probably skewed towards that. But I think for your readers, your listeners, our heretics alchemy tutorials would be great because it's they're like doing the shamanic training, but it's not as difficult. It's the best way I can put it. It's actually something that you could reasonably do in a lifetime. So we've only got through to, I think we've done 4 of them, but we got through to tutorial 3, which is calcination. But if you just pick up the alchemy tutorials, I think it's a bit like shamanism light, if you know what I mean. So I think you'd have
sounds perfect.
A listener
I'm really pleased with
Woven would really like it. Yeah.
Yeah, really pleased with started that tutorial because it makes heretics feel more substantial in terms of we're giving things for people to actually do rather than just sit and listen as a form of entertainment.
So that's episode number 87. That one it starts on.
Yeah. Pretty much that's what I would pick out as well. Start on the alchemy tutorial is a big deal.
Start on the alchemy tutorial and then work back, work backwards.
But that would be my highlight That would be my highlight of the past year on heretics as well. Would be the alchemy tutorial.
Yeah. Good stuff.
Not that I disliked Noah versus Utnapishtim. I personally enjoyed that one. But
that's the Genesis and the Endless Genesis series we're doing, isn't it?
Yeah. We need to do another one them soon. I mean, that's the great thing with heretics. We often say on Woven Energy we'll never run out of topics. We will actually never run out of topics on heretics.
One of the original ideas with heretics was to tackle the religious side of stuff like Christianity, right? That was like
we've done a ton of that.
Fixing Christianity or Christianity 2.0.
That's
an even taller ask than.
I think you can get killed for that. For that.
Well, for my money, if I wanted to, I mean, you're all Woven Energy listeners, so hopefully you've listened to our podcast because as we keep saying, it's always about going back to the beginning. We have a few episodes that are really nice. You can just listen to nice, easygoing episodes. So I think I'll just highlight a few of those. But in large part, Woven Energy is about like reading the encyclopedia of how to become a shaman. So it's about going back to the beginning and working your way through. However, I don't know about you, Damon. Just a few which I'd like to highlight is the right back at the beginning. We did an episode on spirit, the word spirit.
Yeah,
and I loved that one because it really highlighted how language can shape our thoughts, and it's perhaps one of our original episodes on the miasma. Until we did a series on the miasma, but that was pretty good, I thought.
Yeah.
And also one on animism is a personal favourite of mine. I think it was episode 11 or 12 to go back to those.
Yeah.
So I think as Christmas listening, those two would be really, really good, at least for a recap if you haven't listened to them or you're relatively new to the Woven Energy podcast. If you want some more direct, like just introduction to shamanism episodes, we've actually done some recent ones, haven't we, Damon? On the just the 7 stages of how to become a shaman. There's 2 parts to that, and those are definitely worth listening to. So like how to be the 7 stages or the 7 levels of shamanism part 1, the 7 stages of shamanism part 2, and those are pretty cool. And that kind of those episodes got us back into the swing of things with the Woven Energy podcast as well. So that's pretty cool.
The big change for us over the last year on Woven Energy has been getting into level 4 stuff.
Yeah,
and I mean
it's real heavy stuff.
The issue we've got now, of course, because we're established, is that we have some, and we have absolutely Christmas episode. We should be shouting out to our awesome patrons. We have this crowd of patrons, of whom Tammo is one. We got a patron on the podcast.
Yeah,
the patrons have been a revelation to me, not just over the last year, but in general. The how far some of the patrons have got with their shamanic practice never ceases to amaze me. I mean, for instance, Mika sent a video through of him doing his spirit dance, and I thought, good grief, here's a guy who I've never really taught it to in person. It's just my words, and he's really got the hang of it. It was fantastic, we could start naming all the patrons. We'll be here for a while because we have no less than 49 patrons now, which is unbelievable. Thanks so much, guys. And the big highlights for me is A, that we got the patrons, the tribe, which is amazing, but also that we have listeners stroke patrons who've got on far enough in their practice that we can be talking about stuff like level 4. That's amazing. It seemed like we would never get to level 4 stuff. And we have. Yeah.
And it's just getting richer and richer and deeper because the more you get into stage 4, the more I'm doing these episodes with you, Damon, the more I'm realizing that there's probably going to be probably 60 odd episodes on stage 4 before we even get into stage 5.
It just balloons. Yeah, for sure.
Completely ballooned.
Yeah.
So
In terms of heretics, I mean, the big thing for me in terms of heretics, how long have we been going now, Graham?
Oh, it's a few years.
A few years.
I don't know off the top of my head.
We are encroaching on episode 100.
Yeah.
We're 91 episodes we've released, and during the next year, for sure, I don't know where during the next year, but during the next year, for sure, we will be hitting that big 100. So obviously, we've got to think of something very special to do for our 100th episode. Don't know what. Maybe blow something up with an alchemy tutorial or something. But that's a big deal as well. And, thanks to our Heretics listeners as well. We do have people who listen to Heretics as the main podcast they listen to, and that's fantastic. We have such a diversity of stuff on there. It's I was looking at the statistics, to see what's actually popular, because we do so many different things. And looking at the sort of most popular things, our most popular episode. Well, jointly, really, our 2 most popular episodes. I wonder if anybody can guess what our 2 most popular episodes were.
Are you talking about the Heretics or all of the podcasts combined? Heretics, okay.
2 most popular episodes over the last year. I don't know. I think they were recorded over the last year, but that's. I'm just going on with the most popular ever, because I've got the complete list. And our most popular, out of all the episodes we've recorded since the beginning, what did most people listen to during the last year?
Was it Christianity related?
Yes.
I thought so.
Christmas. Was it Christmas related? Mithras?
No. Number 1, Tai Chi versus Christianity.
Really?
It's the verse, Damon. I'm putting my marketing hat on. It's the VS in the middle. It's just like instantly you can guarantee 10 times more views.
It's Tai Chi versus Christianity.
Tai Chi
and
versus
then
Christianity.
number 2 is the Confucians Strike Back, Xingyi Part 14.
Wow. We've got to finish
That's
that
number
off.
2.
Yeah, that's number 2. Yeah. And then number 3 is, I think it's because it sounds like The Empire Strikes Back, maybe. It might be all down to titles, you know. Number 3 is The Fall and Rise of Zeno.
Are you talking just in the last year or generally?
What I'm talking about in general, but what people have listened to over the last year.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. So obviously more recent episodes have a better chance of being high in that list.
Yeah, Stoicism is quite a popular subject these days. So
yeah. Well,
I'm not surprised by that one.
We can definitely continue our Stoicism series. There's plenty more Stoics to go through. And then it was Merry Christmas. Merry Christ Mass. Last year's Christmas episode. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of Christmas, we're here on our big Christmas bash. So the plan now is to talk about a few things Christmassy, right? So we've got some questions here that we could start with and see where we get to. I think they're really interesting questions, very Christmas related. So shall I read one out, Damon?
Go for it.
All right. So topic 1 or question 1. Thanks for your episode on Jesus as a shaman. I think, was that on heretics?
Yeah.
Jesus as a shaman.
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks for your episode on Jesus as a shaman. I think about this topic often and interpret the Gospels through this lens. There was one thing that you guys didn't mention that I think is the most shamanic aspect of the Jesus narrative. Jesus would often heal people of their illnesses by forgiving them of their sins. In a symbolic sense, I think this forgiving is, in a way, revealing to the individual the miasma that they live in. Everyone in that culture lived with the idea of original sin and inherited sin. Okay, so Jesus helped to forgive them of that. In the Jewish miasma of the time, this was highly frowned upon since only God can forgive one's sins. So I think he's wanting you to just expand on that.
Well, that's Ben. Hi, Ben. Ben, our awesome patron, Ben Thurnhofer. Thanks for I had a bit of a chat with Ben about things Jesus, shamanic and Jesus put together, which was great. So the word sin in Greek literally means to miss the mark. So if you fire an arrow at a target and that arrow misses the target or misses the center of the target, then that's sin. What the meaning is in biblical Greek, if you like. So, but that's not necessarily the meaning for instance, in the Old Testament, but that's the meaning of the word that was selected by the Greeks who recorded the stories about Jesus, if you like. Now, if you see the sin as, the miasma can be seen like that, can't it? You can see the miasma as missing the mark. Something goes on in your head that misses the mark of reality, whatever that may be. And you can see that, therefore, you could use the word sin in that way as a synonym for the miasma. And therefore, Jesus, you can see Jesus going around the Holy Land, forgiving people of their sins, making them feel better about their miasma. The question is, was he actually, doing what it says, casting out demons and stuff like that? Was their miasma so bad that he was actually able to cure them simply by forgiving them? But one of the hard things with that kind of stuff, people who are brought up in cultures that are designed to make them beat themselves up, basically. So take Roman Catholic culture, for instance. It's a culture that's designed to make members of that culture tend to beat themselves up over things that they've quote unquote done wrong. I'm not saying everybody within that culture. I'm saying the culture in general has operated for 2,000 years, 1,500 years like that.
A method of self-control again.
Yeah, you're policing yourself in order that you behave the way your authorities, who would be the church authorities in more recent times, want you to behave.
The gatekeepers of heaven.
Yeah, and they don't need to physically police you like they did with the Spanish Inquisition. You police yourself. And if you start behaving in ways that they don't want you to behave, you start beating yourself up. So, I mean, usually spiritually, but it can be, the stuff like flagellation, it can be literally beating yourself up as well. So you can see that there's two things going on there with sin. One is it's a kind of miasma, and the two things are related to each other. There's a kind of miasma that people impose upon themselves, and they beat themselves up. They don't forgive themselves. They have a sort of conscience towards their behavior. And then Jesus came along with the good news, right? Let's have some good news on here. Jesus said, it's okay. You don't have to beat yourself up anymore. And unfortunately, this is Jesus speaking, unfortunately, I have to go through some pretty unpleasant stuff on your behalf in order that you don't have to beat yourself up anymore. That's the bark and mad bit of it. But maybe in order to convince them he did have to, crucify God. Maybe he had to do that. But the issue is, yes, there's something in that. Can you be... The first thing with forgiveness is to forgive yourself. A lot of people go through life beating themselves up over stuff that they've done, quote unquote, badly. Now, sometimes you have done something bad, and some sort of external forgiveness may be needed in that. What I mean by something bad, maybe you've harmed somebody. So, we never mentioned Wicca, did we? So the Wiccan mantra, and it harm none, do what thou wilt. There's a very different philosophy from the typical Christian philosophy. If you haven't actually harmed anybody, then probably the stuff that you're beating yourself up over, you don't need to. And so the good news is that you don't have to. That's the good news that if you like, Jesus the shaman may have been bringing. Of course, we don't know. We don't know because there's no contemporary record of anything that went on with Jesus. We don't even know that the guy existed. Though it seems
we know there
likely.
were lots and lots of different people called Jesus at the time.
Oh, it's a common name, yeah. Yeah, but that's not what I mean.
And there was lots and lots of
the
messiahs as well.
There were lots of guys behaving like that. And of course, we don't know because the Bible was formulated 300 plus years after the events. I think we talked recently. Was that on heretics? Recently, we talked on heretics about the Bible fragments and how old they are.
Yeah, that wasn't recently, though.
It will have been, yeah.
Okay, I thought it was recently.
It's for like a year ago.
Oh, okay. So, the oldest tiny little fragment of the Bible that we have is between 100 AD and 200 AD, 100 to 200 years after the event. And that's a tiny little fragment of one of the Gospels. Mark's a very early one. I think there might be one from Luke as well. But there's some very early fragments of those Gospels. But when we say early, we're still talking about could be as late as 200 AD, early, 200 years after the event. And of course, the first event is the big one at Christmas, isn't it? The Nativity. And, there's a lot of symbolism in that. What does that represent in terms of sin? I mean, it's like the most positive thing in the Bible, isn't it? How do you forgive yourself from sin? Well, certainly having a child outside of wedlock or conceiving a child outside of wedlock. Let's be clear here, not having a child outside, but conceiving a child outside of wedlock is a very sinful thing. And so Mary got off the hook massively by this publication. Mary, the mother of Jesus, which I view as a very positive thing. And then you have the tie-ins with the miasma, with both the miasma and the shamanistic traditions coming from further to the east. You got the three wise men who are magi, right? What's a magi? A magi is a alchemist. A magi is a shamanist, an esoteric dabbler. And so you got that link in Matthew. And then you got detailed accounts of all this stuff in Luke. Mark doesn't mention it, I believe. But which is interesting. The real thing with that is the link there is that there were these pre-existing traditions around Christmas and around birth and renewal and all that kind of stuff. And there had to be a birth renewable thing in Christianity because there was in Mithraism, and Mithraism was a big source of Christianity, so there had to be in Christianity as well. And Mary and the virgin birth fiddles that perfectly. I remember, but it's quite interesting, the miasma there around that. When I was young, I was still in school. I think it was in sixth form or something in school. So that would be around about 1982, 1983, something like that. We were visited by the infamous Bishop of Durham, and we sat and had a chat with him in the sixth form common room. The famous Bishop of Durham, the one who became a bishop and yet didn't believe in the virgin birth. Which was, I remember at that time, was like shocking to the general population. It shows you how the zeitgeist has moved on in the UK.
Yeah.
I don't know, would that still be shocking? Would that be shocking in Austria, Tammo? I don't know.
To be honest, I'm so far away from these whole internal discussions about Christianity, even though my father is a pastor. I don't know, but probably yes, in certain circles for sure.
Church of England would be fine with it now.
Yeah, totally. Well, clearly they were. They knew he didn't believe in it, and they still made him a bishop, which is awesome. That's a great quote from Richard Dawkins talking about the Church of England. He says, the Church of England's actually pretty cool. Then he sort of pauses and he says, at least compared to the competition. So,
well, I mean, what I've found out that progressive Christians tend to have very, very open perspective on the interpretation of the Bible and everything that accompanies it. So for instance, from my experience, from my family, that a couple of years, maybe 20 years back, my father at a certain time was very heavily interested in shamanism. At that time, I didn't really take it very seriously, because I just wasn't interested in the topic. So, and he was an active pastor at that time. And so basically my whole family comes from a very Christian, a Protestant Christian background, not a Catholic Christian background, and they tend to be very, very open about the roots of Christianity and how to interpret the Bible and so on.
Sure. So my family's from a Protestant background as well, but they're not very open about how you interpret the Bible at all. So it goes to show, doesn't it? Like, they don't, I got an uncle who's a pastor, or he was a pastor. He's retired now. But, he, there would be no discussion on certain subjects at all. It was just
you've got a spectrum. You've got a spectrum there in terms of the influence of inter-family miasma on religious belief. And this is why I believe, if you like, that you can never know how many staunchly religious people there actually are in the world, because where you get that in communities where your behavior, if it's not extremely religious, is frowned upon by your family and by the people around you, you will swear blind to anybody and everybody that you are a staunch follower of that particular religion, because
to maintain your social standing.
Saying anything else will cause you unnecessary grief and possibly danger in some circumstances. You cannot know. And one of the really interesting things is within those societies, within very, very exoteric societies where the religion is deeply caked into society. I mean, we did the Salem witch trials. That was a long time ago, wasn't it?
A long
deeply
time.
Caked. It can be extremely dangerous to drop the slightest hint that you're not extremely religious. And so one of the ways that people protect themselves from the potential harm within those societies is to appear to go to the opposite extreme. They appear to be more extremely religious than the people who are going to be burning them or criticizing them or casting them out or doing an honor killing or anything like that.
Didn't you speak about Erasmus from Rotterdam in this way?
Yeah,
Wasn't
that's
he a
right.
person like that? Exactly.
That's right. Yeah, you protect yourself by going to further than that. Well, to a certain extent, you got any of those famous religious figures had to do it. Martin Luther is case in point. One of the reasons why Martin Luther survived was his titanic command of the Bible. They were frightened to argue with him, basically. I mean, the religious authorities were frightened to argue with him because they're just going to instantly go into a deep level theological debate. To be honest, I've had this myself in my life. In terms of, I've had some involvement with the Japanese Shinshukyo, and I got away with murder, not literally murder, but in terms of the things that I would say around in a just general social chat setting, the things that I was willing to say, I got away with because anybody else within that community, they'd have come down on them like a ton of bricks, but they didn't come down on me because they knew we'd be straight into detailed theological debate.
Yeah.
I can tell you one of the reasons why we kept turning up to see you. We kept coming to these events, right? And one of the reasons, especially when we talked amongst ourselves, was to go, let's go see Damon. Let's go see Damon light up a few fuses, Let's just see what happens.
Yeah, I was quite good at it, wasn't I?
Yeah.
So yeah, and it's a protective mechanism to know their stuff better than they know it. But it doesn't protect you completely. Look at Savonarola, for instance, who we covered on Heretics. We did him this year, didn't we?
Yeah, pretty sure.
Yeah. So he's our mascot. So it's about time we did him.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I think that Ben's general point about can you see sin as a sort of euphemism for
Shamanic
miasma.
healing.
And the forgiveness of sins is about sweeping away that miasma from people. And could somebody, a great spiritual leader like Jesus possibly was, could they do that? Probably they could. But this is why I distinguish between the character of Jesus and the church and the teachings of the church, because the two things have very little to do with each other. First of all, we don't know what historical Jesus actually taught. We have highly conflicting early sources on what he taught. I mean, even within the New Testament, let alone including the Nag Hammadi texts and all those sort of supposedly apocryphal things. But in terms of what the church has done, in terms of sin, the church has created sin as let's use this to control people and get them to beat themselves up. And therefore, how do they get forgiveness? Well, one of the ways they can get forgiveness is by giving us money, right? That's
well, it's interesting as well. The Catholic Church, right? Because it's just built into it over there. So you would go and see whoever. I mean, I'm not religious. I don't really know the terms, but I know that in Catholicism you go to confess your sins, right? So maybe that's a carryover.
Yeah,
I don't know whether
a friend of mine,
there.
I'll not name him because he wouldn't want to be named, as if the Catholic Church sold shares, I would buy them.
Yeah, nowadays I'm not so sure anymore.
That's an example of the church positioning itself between you and God, isn't it? It's like you must come and...
Yeah, salvation by proxy. But in a way, isn't that what Jesus did as well? The atoning sacrifice is the bit of Jesus that I don't particularly like. I mean, it had to be there because Mithras had an atoning sacrifice. He wasn't sacrificing himself, he was sacrificing the bull, but there's a sacrifice in there. There had to be, for renewal within nature, there had to be an icon. And so it's nice and neat that Jesus got sacrificed at the end. But if you think about it, in terms of the teachings that I view as positive, do unto others as you have done unto yourself, especially, that the classic is, let he is without sin cast the first stone. That just sums it all up, doesn't it? Absolutely sums it all up. There's some great stuff in there. So, and also having women as prominent members, even, the apostle to the apostles was a woman, that's also not just unusual in the culture of the Holy Land at that time. I'm careful not to say Jewish culture because, as I've said before, I think that Judaism hadn't developed yet at that point in time, in the form that we have it today, at least. It was something very different at that point in time. But the culture of the Holy Land, that would have been unusual. And in the culture of Rome, that would have been unusual. So there's something that's genuinely different. The apostle to the apostles was a woman, you know. Although, however much they redacted the finding of the tomb scene, famously it's the most hacked about bit of the Bible if you start looking into the text. It's just been, you know, like the lots of little bits of film on the cutting room floor and lots of bits of sellotape and stuff all around to get Peter into the story, you know. Very funny. It's worth looking up if you haven't seen it, the redaction of the discovery of the tomb by Mary Magdalene. It's absolutely hilarious. You got people who aren't present speaking and stuff like that, you know. Quite interesting. So, yeah, but
I've got a
go for it.
I've got a question that I could pose to everyone. Do you think, like, with a modern society like we have now, that perhaps is less religious or less reliant on being embedded into the religious foundation, do you think, like, it can be the more deeply steeped you get in religion, the more risk you have of losing your objectivity and losing your rationality and able to see through that? Because like Tammo just mentioned, some deeply religious people can also maintain that objectivity and poke through that miasma, whereas others, like, for example, my uncle, he's quite a deeply religious Catholic, and I would have a bit of fun, actually, sort of prodding and poking him about Jesus and his miracles and all this kind of stuff. So I'm just curious what you think about religion.
I've got one quick
being
point on
steeped
that.
in religion and the miasma.
Yeah, I'm gonna let Tammo and Graham answer that one, but I'm just gonna make a point, which I think I made recently, is that people don't recognize their religion. You say that Britain has become a less religious society. I don't believe that that's true. I just think there are new religions like football and the media democratic complex. Those religions people still believe in strongly. I think they're replacing the old religions. They're replacing the old religions. They're not. And they believe in those religions every bit as passionately, to the point where they will double think on them. You know, the concept of double think from George Orwell's 1984.
Yeah.
People en masse have recently double thought about football, for instance, with the whole LGBT plus armbands fiasco.
You forgot Q.
LGBTQ
Cancelled
Q plus.
That's it. The point is that they were all up for wearing those armbands during the World Cup, and they decided not to because football's more important than anything else. Their religion is more important than anything else. But that wasn't the bad thing. The bad thing was how easy a time the media gave them over it. Everybody just forgot about it instantly.
Do you give credence to the idea that there is a religious-shaped hole in people that needs to be filled?
No.
And that can be filled by anything?
No, I don't. There's not a religion-shaped hole in people. I think what there is there's a religion-shaped need in ruling elites, and they have to fill it.
I think that my perspective on this is that I think many people have a very deep sense of I don't know how to say this, a deep need for spirituality. And what I've observed over my lifespan now is a constant decline in Christianity, and in the last 15 years, a constant rise in yoga. I think in our modern day societies, yoga is becoming very, very strongly a big competition for Christian practice. Many people have started practicing yoga seriously on a very regular basis, and but from my observance, also as an insider, it's highly miasmatic, and the people basically start to follow the same structures and the same principles that they would adhere to in a Christian setting, in a Christian religious setting. And you also have your congregations and your mass and your high priests and priests and whatever, and it's basically the same thing.
We need to continue our series on yoga, incidentally.
Sure. I mean, I think the basis of yoga. I mean, since I've gotten somewhat of a grasp of what shamanism is, I interpreted yoga as something not completely different to what most people see it, but as to something which can be expanded to be something very honest and something very what I would call shamanism. And
I would be very interested.
Yes,
sorry, Tammo. I'd be interested in you and Damon's take on yoga and the vinyasa yoga, which is very much more flowing and, to me, kind of looks like very basic level spirit dance in a way. It just all connects together. It's very, very flowy. That would be interesting to hear your take on that.
When we do some more yoga episodes, maybe we'll pull, because I know Tammo's very interested in it. Actually, we did the yoga episodes on heretics simply because Tammo kept bugging us. So we'll pull him in. We'll pull him in on heretics.
Yeah, sure. Pull me in. I'd love to talk about yoga with you guys because it does have a very, very interesting also connection to a very, very, very concrete connections to the way you talk about shamanism all the time. I see absolutely no difference. Absolutely no difference. It's just words. It's just sounds that the people utter, and the way the people perceive it. That's the only difference from my point of view. Well, let's say not the only difference, but a major difference.
It's still mainly not many men doing yoga, as far as I can see.
And the men doing yoga, they go because all the women doing yoga. No,
but even the ratio in the class is like, it's 10 to 1, isn't it, or something?
It's exactly opposite to martial arts. In a martial arts class, you have 10 guys and 2 girls, and in yoga class, you have 10 girls and 2 guys. It's just actually, yoga is for women, martial arts is for men. In quotation marks, sorry.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, jiu-jitsu is another religion, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
Sure. That's got all the hallmarks of religion.
All religions have saving graces. I would say that BJJ is a religion, but with very strong saving graces. There's a lot of good stuff you can get out of that I intend to get out of Graham as the years go by.
Yeah.
But that's another thing. If you have to be involved in some sort of a religion in your life, some sort of an exoteric religion, at least pick one that you get something out of. Because the interesting thing, you get literally nothing.
The interesting thing is when we talk about the BJJ and religion. I've been practicing now BJJ for 2 years, 2.5 years, something like that. And I've become a total fan. I really, really love BJJ, practicing it. And
you're still doing it though?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've had a kind of a break for 3 months now due to some private reasons, but. And the guy I'm practicing with, he's such a lovely individual. He's so great, but he's also a very formidable fighter as well, a bouncer, and a guy who really knows his stuff. But he's such a gentle-hearted man, and he has such a positive impact on these mostly young men and boys sometimes who come to him. And but he always jokingly says to me, "Come on, Tammo, you have to open Gracie Barra in Güssing. I will support you." And I always tell him, look, mate, I'm not going to do that because I'm done with churches. I want to join another church.
But that's the thing. It's a commercial religion, isn't it? Jiu-jitsu. It's all about opening your own school and starting your own business, and it's capitalism. It's all that sort of stuff.
They're talking about teaching it to the police now, aren't they? Because of how just raw practical that BJJ is.
Well, it is in the religion. In the religion, it is.
Yeah, I've had quite a few policemen come into our class, and it's quite fun rolling with a policeman actually, because I can beat them up.
Yes,
with impunity.
Even though you're really big and strong and a policeman, like I've been doing this for years, and so it's quite satisfying. But that's quite fun.
I have to do a plug for Graham's particular BJJ association. Gracie Barra do the whole marketing thing beautifully. Their robes, their priestly robes are better than anybody else's.
Yeah, it's exactly really like a church. It really is.
They are the piece de resistance of BJJ keys.
But what I must say, in the context of this whole thing, they do it really, really well. I mean, not in a positive sense. I mean. And what I observe is that maybe it's also due to his personality, but what I observe is that they also supply these mostly young males with some some sense, some sort of security, and some sort of belonging to, and something good, something uniquely good.
Yeah, it's something positive, and they can achieve things through hard work, which is, that makes a big difference to your life. If you're not the sort of person that's achieved much through hard work, then you discover jiu-jitsu, and then you can, you just train hard, and you keep getting rewarded with belts and things as you go on, and it takes a lot of grit to stay in it. It's very easy to quit, really easy to quit. So it develops some sort of
resilience
within you. Yeah, exactly. And you can take that into the rest of your life quite easily.
I can give you an example of a religion that's more effective in the UK than even BJJ, though. That is it doesn't really have a name, because these things are more effective when people don't have a name to give to them, but it's a three-way complex. The three-way complex is the government, Oxford University, and the BBC. If I go down the list of prime ministers who fit into that religion, let me tell you their names. Just a few random. Obviously, there can't be very many that fit into that complex. Rishi Sunak, Liz Truss, Boris Johnson, Theresa May, David Cameron, Tony Blair, Margaret Thatcher, Harold Wilson, Edward Heath, Alec Douglas-Hume. Yeah, the list goes on and on and on. That religion has been extraordinarily effective in the United Kingdom.
So here's a topic. Here's a topic for your 100th heretics episode.
Yeah,
fixing the UK government.
No, that'd be. I want an upper for the 100th episode, not down. So here's a question for you guys. As you know, I'm a massive fan of Christmas. Now, people find that really surprising, I think, that I'm such a big fan of Christmas. For each person, give me a couple of things, starting with Joe, give me a couple of things that you like about Christmas.
Well, I mean, just off the top of my head, the generic one, really, just spending time with family and just being together, and the food. Love the food. Also, now that I have a kid, Gia, who's just about, she's 3.5, so she's really going to understand Christmas now. So just seeing on Christmas Day morning her face, and as a parent, just seeing that aspect of being a kid, and just completely being, as we would say, on the top line on Christmas Day morning. That's pretty cool. So that's what I like about Christmas. My broad opinion about Christmas is I'm kind of neither here nor there with it. I like it. Whatever for me. But those are the aspects that I quite like.
Go on then, Graham.
Of course, same for me, really. My kids have grown up to be teenagers now, so that whole wonder of Christmas thing is gone. But that used to be what it was all about, and now it's I think it's just getting together as a family, really, and not having to do anything. Which I love, not having to do anything. Yeah. I'm a real fan of not doing anything, because it's so rare to be able to not do anything.
I've got only one teenager left. The other two are over 20. But it is good. It is good. So, Tammo.
Well, I have to join the other two guys. It's this coming together as a family. But I have to say there are lots of things that I dislike, but I won't talk about them now. But what I also really like about the Austro-German culture is, do you know Glühwein?
No.
It's like
no.
It's a warm, it's a hot wine that they serve with cinnamon.
Oh, we do
and
stuff like that.
Yeah. Mulled wine. We call it mulled wine.
Mulled wine.
Yeah, it's like punch or punch.
Yeah.
I don't know how you pronounce that in English.
Yeah, it's very good.
You have these, dozens of these stands all over the center of town, and just go and drink one or two cups. It's really sociable and nice. The people standing outside in the darkness, and it's quite
That's
jolly.
one of the things that I like about it as well, is all the fancy food, the mulled wine and spices and all that kind of stuff. But the interesting thing with that is that why do we have to stop? You have all these nice things at Christmas, like mulled wine, and you get the Christmas trees and the tinsel. I mean, if it was up to me, I would leave a Christmas tree up year round, year in, year out. Why take it down? That's like the bar humbug aspect of it, I know where it all came from. I mean, originally, the thing that I like about Christmas is that we're preserving something truly ancient that far predates Christianity. It's the turning of the year. And it's a time of year, certainly when you're in northern latitudes, it's a time of the year when food is scarce. There's a lot of preserved foods, hence the spices and all that kind of stuff. The harvest, if you're an agricultural community, seems an awful long way off. The nights are getting shorter, they're getting darker. That kind of suits guys like me because I love the stars and what have you. But a lot of people, it doesn't suit people. It's getting colder, and it just seems like spring's an awful long way off. If you're sat in October and you're thinking, oh, I've got to get all the way through to March before those little flowers start appearing in the hedgerows, that's a big chunk of time. But if in the middle of that you put this awesome, wonderful celebration where families get together, they have lovely food and tinsel and wine and good cheer, and they behave nicely. I've noticed recently drivers on the roads behave far more nicely around Christmas than they do at other times of year, Good cheer to all men, all that kind of stuff. That's what I like about Christmas. It's that ancient festival of the renewal of the year, but it's timed absolutely perfectly on the birthday of Mithras to coincide with this time when people would be the most down, typically, especially agriculturalists. Hunter-gatherers, they don't care. But agriculturalists are going to be the most down, the furthest away from the harvest you can get, right? And that's right now. And so it's just a wonderful, wonderful institution. And the fact that Christianity adopted it, fantastic. I'm totally up for Christianity adopting as many pagan, as they would call it, festivals as possible. Another interesting thing to mention on the pagan front in the census, there's a lot more pagans. We talked about there being a lot more shamanists. There's a lot more pagans. Pagan is literally a swear word that was invented by Christians. There was no other source of that word. It entirely derogatory, 100% derogatory term, and it's kind of fun now that there are people actually actively identifying themselves as pagans with like a badge of pride, quite funny,
Well, isn't it a little bit like the N-word from America, I
guess.
Yes,
I guess. So, yeah.
Nice. Well, speaking of Christmas, we have, and speaking of how much we love Christmas, there's a second question here that we could briefly address, which I think is quite funny now that we've just talked about it. Christmas is all about stories, as are religions. Sometimes people take those stories a little too seriously. And then he says, who is this, by the way? Who sent this one in?
Ben Thurnoff.
Ben again. Okay.
One of our awesome patrons.
The thing I love about Christmas is the lie, I'm sure that's said sarcastically, is the lie about Santa we tell kids. We set up children to learn that their society lies to them. We may be doing that so that kids learn to question other things like heaven, hell, God, and government. Oh, maybe not sarcastically. Fair enough.
Oh, he's a true heretic.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah, I mean, it is good for that. I mean, I have tremendous fun with that with my youngest one, who's a teenager. I have young teenager. I have tremendous fun with that. I still swear blind that Santa exists, no matter what he does or says to the contrary. That is interesting. It is a good mechanism, I think, for teaching kids that it's about that age when you start finding out that Santa doesn't exist. It's the age that maybe it starts dawning on you that your parents aren't 100% perfect and that they may have minor flaws in their characters, but you still love them, But, it's... I've
often thought the same thing, that the myth of Santa is... It's meant to be a lie that you discover on your own, because it teaches you that most of society is based on dubious ideas that aren't actually true.
Yeah, it's a great lightweight intro to the Miasma and the Heretics podcast. Yeah. We did do Santa, didn't we? At some point in time, we did Santa.
Yeah, we did in once.
Yeah. We did.
I think 2 years ago you did a great episode on Christmas. I think the one 2 years ago, 2020.
If you've done some on Heretics, we've also done some on Woven Energy on Santa, probably. Haven't we? We've done a big Christmas episode. In fact, I think last year we did a really cool Christmas episode. It's one of those episodes where I come to you with several questions and then you just proceed to burst my bubble every single time and just I come with such optimism to you, Damon. And
Get smacked down relentlessly.
Yes, smacked down with reality. Oh, well. Because there's that whole thing about, reindeers and shamanism and going on the journey and stuff, and Christmas trees and it being the light, something to do with the lights on Christmas trees. There's all sorts of weird and wonderful theories around Christmas and Christmas trees and the reindeers and stuff. So all of that's super interesting. So you can go back to the last year's episode as well and check that out. Well, how are we doing, gents? Is that
that's good for
is that us wrapping up?
So just
I think
Christmas wishes
cool
or Yuletide wishes if you're not a Christian. Mithras wishes if you're a Mithrist. To all of our listeners, thanks ever so much for listening to us and supporting us through the years. A lot of you have been listening for years and years, I know, which is amazing. To our awesome tribe of patrons who we'll be meeting up with next year in the gathering of the tribe over in Austria with Tammo.
Joe, you also have to come.
I know that. We all have to come. Oh, Joe has to come. Yeah.
Yeah, Joe.
For sure.
Yeah, sure. Graham already said he's coming. You haven't responded yet. You also have to come.
You've got to do it, mate. You have no choice.
I'll take a look.
We'll
fair enough.
Kidnap him if needs be.
Yeah, exactly.
So yes, but it's been a great year. And so I just really want to thank everybody for the support and to you three for making these podcasts happen. It's greatly appreciated, the effort you put in.
So I just want to say thank you ever so much to the patrons again. You can also support us at patreon.com/wovenenergy for all sorts of weird and wonderful little extras and bits and bobs. I also want to highlight the Heretics podcast. So, there's so much, there's a deep well of episodes and interesting information over there. And the good thing about the Heretics podcast, as opposed to the Woven Energy podcast, is you could just take a look at those titles and just dip in. Apart from maybe the series that you do, but there's definitely lots of
anything except the alchemy tutorial. Yeah. And maybe the history of Shingi.
Yeah. And also we can highlight you and Tammo's podcast called The Energy Arts as well, which I'm sure will flourish and be nurtured into something more than it is right now. I think you're on episode 3, yeah?
We're going to record episode 3, yeah.
Soon, yeah.
Okay, so very young, but definitely a lot of potential there. So go and show that podcast some love as well.
Yeah, the official name is Fixing Aikido. That's what you'll find it with. Sorry, Tammo.
No problem.
That's what I named it.
I can live with that.
But the graphic has Aikido 2.0 written on it. But
yeah,
the official
exactly.
name is Fixing Aikido.
Yeah.
So we got
Is it
both.
Fixing Aikido by Woven Energy?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's fixing. You'll find it under Woven Energy anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay.
Cool.
So any last words from anyone before I sign us off?
Well, I just want to say Happy Christmas to everyone and have a great time and raise a glass to the shamans of the world.
Yeah.
And a positive...
I'll do that.
Yeah.
A positive new shamanic year.
Yeah.
Year ahead. We've got lots and lots of episodes planned for the Woven Energy, as I'm sure you have for all the other, for Heretics and Energy Arts or
it's a good
Fixing
point.
Aikido.
It's a good point. We've got to continue the growth of shamanism in the UK. We've got to continue it during the next year. That's our New Year's resolution.
Ride this new wave. Ride the wave.
Create the wave.
Absolutely.
Okay, cheers, guys. Thanks very much.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to all. Merry Christmas to all. Thank you very much for all your continued support and listening, and we will see you in the next one.